am Mark Torkelson. Welcome. I've come up with a methodology to promote good sportsmanship on and off the court. The benefit of this application of sports etiquette to business ethics will promote a capitalism that better serves society through fairness, kindness, empathy, a level playing field. These are the values of sports applied to big business, kind of a first tee for adults. Now, I have that available at fairwaygood.com. This particular project is about freedom of speech. I call it First Amendment Tea Party, to promote freedom of speech, our fundamental right in our freedom. This has been jeopardized and has been detrimental both on a personal and professional level to me. I've actually had an injunction, and you'll be able to see this in my book, that was of constitutional proportion in limiting my freedom of speech. It was withdrawn, and it was based on a poem that really speaks to this idea of good sportsmanship and duty. It's based on the Sullenberger's flight because aviation is a big part of this work. So that is a little overview. Now I've come up with some acronyms to implement this type of bad behavior, which I call dick, being dickish behavior. Someone's acting like a dick. And the way I see we can transform our society so capitalism better serves society is through transcending dick behavior with love. Sowing the seeds of love through the application of Muff, mutually unified fun and fortune. With mutually unified fun and fortune, the love of Muff transcends the hate of dick, thereby producing a better society based on love and a better capitalism. Once again, another acronym, replacing the harsh capitalism with cushly capitalism. Harsh, once again, is an acronym for the old-style capitalism that Milton Friedman promoted, where the sole purpose of capitalism was for the shareholders' benefit. Well, today we have a wider scope, and this harsh, archaic capitalism, you can read we'll get through the acronym, replaced with cushly, which is caring, less restrictive, synergistic. Not only am I going to give examples of this, but we're going to implement it in the last part of this presentation to use love to transcend hate, to resolve problems that come up both on a personal and professional level with love rather than hate. On a personal level, I'll start with the idea of identity politics destroying, and you can see this, destroying a 40-year friendship based on my grieving over a friend's death that I presented in this video on the bottom. You can link to it. Tragedy in Palm Beach. Well, I was speaking of the idea that when we are faced with adversity, we look to leadership for inspiration. You know, in World War II, FDR said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Well, that wasn't the case. You know, they had invasion and occupation to fear. At the point he said that, the victory was not in the bag. So my concept is one of spirituality in this approach to sowing the seeds of love through keeping a good attitude. Now, it's ironic, and I don't want to belabor this point because we were both grieving the loss of a friend, but this identity politics is divisive. And because you'd be the judge, I'm not going to tell you much about this tragedy in Palm Beach. Watch the video, it's the death of a friend, and decide if that's worth losing another friend over because of a political disagreement. And I wasn't even making a really political statement, I was making a compliment. Anyway, you be the judge. So these things happen, and it's how we respond to them, and hopefully art can be a vehicle to help us evolve and elevate ourselves. In that regard, I had presented this poem, the subject of the injunction, which will be part 2 of this, and it ironically is directed, all my idea of aviation artwork is to uplift the human spirit through the flying experience. And I hope it ultimately can bring world peace through the aviation and golf of good sportsmanship that I brought to the border of Sweden and Finland in the summer of 22, a few months ago, to promote tolerating pars, not wars, through good sportsmanship. Well, that will be the conclusion of this. This is the introduction. And ironically, it's based on the Sullenberger Hero of the Hudson, Landing in the Hudsons, written in the style of Star Wars. It's a poem, and I have dyslexia, so reading my own poetry is a problem, so I'll do my best. In a small part of the world, in a galaxy not so far away, can one person make a difference? Yes, they can, and have made a difference in the lives of others. In some cases, the difference they make has determined the very existence of the lives of others. As the captain of the Concordia carelessly careened his craft into the coast, costing lives, or Sully skillfully side-slipping a slithery slope into the salty seas, saving souls. The one inexplicable difference is whether or not they are engaged in detrimental cocksucking. So this is the idea of duty, and he said that very clearly in the Inquisition regarding his crash, and this is what I believe our civil duty is. To behave like Sullenberger and simply do our job as human beings, to behave with sports etiquette. So we do that through restraint. And now this was the subject of the injunction of which I spoke, which we will address through my interactive Cushley capitalism and make an offer to resolve this in a beneficial way. Now, part two with this whole little shindig is rather interesting because it's tied together with Sullenberger, aviation, Tom Hanks, and the like, because the whole idea of my First Amendment Tea Party with 2 E's, golftee.com, is to promote freedom of expression, freedom of speech. The whole purpose of promoting freedom of speech is very important as an artist. Hanks is an artist, and also duty is important as an aviator and as a civilized human being to simply do our jobs. Now I've combined these two with fairway good to promote sports etiquette. Now the aviation experience brought me onto this new idea of tolerate pars, not wars, based on freedom of speech. Now, ironically, Tom Hanks and Spielberg are making a movie about the aviation conflict of World War II in the European theater, The Bomber Boys, based on a book by Miller, which is based on my father's bomb group, the 100th Bomb Group. He was an airplane commander, a pilot, in the 350th Squadron of the 100th Bomb Group. Miller's book, Spielberg's movie, it's going to be very exciting, and I have a ton of artwork that relates to that, were my buddies. I've been drinking with those guys since I was 13 in the movie. I've been drinking with them since the age of 13, our first 100th Bomb Group reunion in Colorado Springs. I knew Rosie, Bob Rosenthal, and his wife Phyllis very well, played tennis with them, and I'd bring her a Cuddy Sark after tennis and have a little myself, and we'd have a lot of laughs. They were very nurturing people, and they were the idea of this greatest generation, which, they had a lot of great things that they did, so and I love those guys. So that's the movie about my dad's friends and him. He was a pilot. He flew a number of missions, which I speak specifically of in the aviation artwork, which integrates golf and good sportsmanship. So General Jeffrey, whom I knew very well, had a lot of drinks together, was the general who was the commanding officer of the 100th Bomb Group. He was portrayed by Gregory Peck in the film 12 O'Clock High. He had this psychological command to promote professionalism, which would the contemporary aviators in the military are professionals. They do their job. Before that, they were kind of cowboys of the sky. I know this stuff because I've studied it actually at Cambridge University here in England, and found these guys fascinating. So drinking with General Jeffrey, who was instilling his professionalism, we're in a B-17 in Palm Springs having Bloody Marys in the bomb bay, and he's older, obviously. He says, "Mark, I'm going to say very loudly that I'm going to use the relief tube. And as I do that, you'll notice that everybody scatters and laughs at the same time, but they scatter because they think I might be senile." Well, these guys were a lot of fun too, but they did their job and they did their duty. So we'll speak of that. So the point of this, sharing this story, is freedom of speech. Now, my dad went through all that World War II stuff, and he became a bit of a peacenik and a liberal. And that's great for him, but I didn't feel that way. I'm kind of full circle getting back to that. But we would speak freely and openly. He was a University of Chicago guy, so he loved that debate. And in the early 2000s, he would say, "Son, we liberate countries. We don't occupy. In that regard, Bush is as bad as Hitler." I said, "Oh, hey, whoa, wait a minute, Dad. I don't really see it that way. Frankly, you had your shot at the American dream with the arsenal of democracy, World War II experience, GI Bill, and now this Bush war is about what we call the military-industrial complex. Now it will become known as the," wait for it, it's my book, "Deep Throat State of Affairs." And that's what I'll address in the second part. So anyway, we had this freedom to discuss these things regarding the state of affairs and disagree. Now, the friend who unfriended me disagreed with me and completely destroyed a friendship. So if we go with Muff, rather than as a response to dick behavior, we can transcend things with love. And this goes back to what we'll get into in the next part here. St. Francis, who spoke of transcending hate and by sowing the seeds of love, responding, "Sowing the seeds of love." Egg on your face. So tolerate some fun, and let's see if we can get into this. Now you have an overview. Thank you. On to part one. Deep throat state based on freedom of expression. Any free country needs to be able to express the desires of the people. We the people, the word in the Bible. These are what separate us from animals. As I referenced the Humphrey Bogart, what separates us when Katharine Hepburn said we're all just animals. But the way we choose not to behave like animals is through our communication, civility, because these represent ideas. When these freedoms are breached, then we do become animals. So we need this freedom of speech, and when my freedom of speech was jeopardized in an injunction for the betterment of a billionaire's business, it got me started on the deep state of affairs, and I call it the deep throat state of affairs, being cheeky. It's based on the 5 B's: banks, big business, billionaires, Boeings, and the beach. So we'll get into this little overview, and you can read the book, but I think my experience is mirrored in a recent article in the London Times regarding a company that I have a beef with, which is Swiss Reinsurance. This injunction was for the benefit of their business. I had sent out a number of flyers to promote a dialogue in settling a battery case, with the idea that we can talk about it because the lawyer for the Soho House didn't allow me the dignity of speech. He stymied my speech with an insurance adjuster, Swiss Re. Now you behave in a dignified fashion, even if you think I'm full of you know what. You dignify me with an answer, like your addled grandmother, you nod and smile. Had I had this inclusion and not been discriminated against because he could, I wouldn't have had to send out all these flyers, and then the injunction would have never happened because I was stymied. Now this is a golf principle where it's an archaic rule in golf where you restrict another person. They don't even use that in golf anymore. Well, this is the idea of stymieing free speech. It's happening big time now where people are saying, oh, it's dangerous talk, we can't have it. You can't stymie someone's voice because once you do that, all hell breaks loose. And that's my job as an artist, to promote this sort of madness to a point of organized chaos that will benefit society by producing some tangible results, which we will get to, through freedom of expression. So we do that with golf artwork by addressing the deep throat state, and I actually did it in a very cheeky way with a book theft. Because the very billionaire whose betterment of the business, Burkle, Barnes & Noble, is promoting free speech as a bookseller. And how can we have that when a major shareholder is putting an injunction on me? And I was like, this is upsetting. But what really pushed me over the edge is when I read this. He's the owner of Soho House who beat me up and got away with it. Anyway, I found that they're making secret filings with the for an IPO in order to go public. They haven't made a nickel. This kind of loan I could never get. So I'm looking at the idea of justice with what we call symmetry. You see, here's Lady Justice balancing the scales, but she's holding a golf club for the level playing field of golf. The tee box is a level playing field. Well, I was in the Aspen Art Museum, and when I heard this, I was going to level the playing field with a book theft. Ironically, from the Hunter S. Thompson American Dream program, so I thought it was very fitting. Now, I knew I was busted. It was clear. I had signed in with my cell phone. They were 100% aware that I was there. I was there every day studying this movie, and everything's covered with CCTV. So I had the book, and I thought, well, I'm just going to borrow this and start a dialogue with these folks, because I had just read that he's getting a secret loan. I said, well, and he stole, oh, this is very important, and for the betterment of his business, I'm an athlete, and I putt like a savant, and I won an international championship for a fully paid European vacation from the Soho House sponsor. He revoked it. He stole my trip. I was the recipient of that trip. It was rightfully mine. I signed a agreement. But they took that from me. I said, well, Christ, if a billionaire can steal my European trip, I can steal a book. And this was precipitated particularly by a banking situation. It was the end of the month, and I have ACHs, and it failed to go through, and I'm a big foodie. And I thought, this is crazy. I literally was going to pay them on Monday, and I have money. It's just I don't manage it well. So anyway, I took the book. Now you would think in the society of nurturing and enlightened folks in Aspen, which I love those guys. However, they threw the book at me, literally. I'm a bona fide civil disobedience because I did the crime and I paid the time. I went to court over it. I pled guilty. I was guilty. I don't recommend that you engage in book theft or this sort of civil disobedience, but I called it my misguided Rosa Parks. And that was where she not only took her seat, but she commandeered the bus. And it was as if I kind of went over the top. And so I did that, but it wasn't harming. It wasn't a capital offense. But anyway, I'm a bona fide civil disobedience. So this is not the answer to the deep cutthroat state because I believe in love and overcoming these problems through mutually unified fun and fortune. It was a dick thing to take my European trip, and through the banks, the big business, the billionaire, I relinquished that trip, and I'll still, we can believe we can resolve this through application. That was harsh capitalism, through the Cushley capitalism of synergizing with the art in the next section. So that is, the Boeings will be the world peace through addressing the idea of tolerating pars, not wars. And the beach is interesting because I'm in a legal battle, and it's just amazing to me. You know, I flailed miserably, and we'll get to that in the next section. And it was very upsetting, and it showed once again how their clever lawyer, with his Johnny Cochran moments, could what they call quarry favor in a way that really speaks to the whole idea of identity politics. I didn't defend the opening, we'll get to that opening statement, but he had the ear of the bench, and her statement was really, we'll get to that. And the beach, the reason I mentioned the beach is in conclusion. I'm continuing now with their defamation by implication case, and their clever lawyer is trying to impute me as trespassing because he is playing with semantics as if the beach is part of the perimeter of Soho House. Well, the perimeter of Soho House, my friend, begins when you sign in as a member. The beach has a high water mark in the United States, and that is the perimeter. And I can free to stroll up and down the high water mark. Now, I did, and it made him nervous, so I said, fine, you know, I don't want to freak you guys out. I have plenty of friends on other parts of the beach. But if I have to go from point A to B, I'm free to transition there. Anyway, so now he's taking this freedom, and this is the slippery slope of which I speak, where we go from taking my voice to taking my right to the beach, and when you take my right to the beach, you're going to make me a trespasser. Well, that can happen if I represent myself, because I'm not a good lawyer. As I've mentioned, my lawyering days are coming to a closure. I have failed so miserably at this, and it was an endurance art experience. Warned not to do it. Only a fool for a lawyer represents himself. I'm not even a lawyer, it was pro se. But I uncovered a lot of systemic failings in the judicial system and the need for judicial reform. Particularly, and that's why I'm very apprehensive about pursuing my present case, which the Soho House is on the hook for, defamation of character by implication. They have a poster of me in the elevator, and their employee elevator, and we have to source it out. And I may bail out of this and just do the artwork, because this was such a traumatic experience for me, and it's very cathartic to share. Okay, so I filed the case years ago with the hopes that we could find a good resolve through my Muff program. It was based on the idea of breach of contract. They have tiny print, and they didn't have to abide by the contract that you're entitled. Once again, freedom of speech. And this is First Amendment Tea Party.org stuff, where our civility is determined by our communication. I was not allowed a proper communication with a dismissal on my non-renewal. You sit down and you say, yes, and we're not renewing you for this reason. Well, that's how civilized people hate. They tricked me. I'm dyslexic, I don't read emails, and they knew it. They saw me every day, and they had every opportunity to inform me that I was not renewed. All they had to do was simply put a letter at the front desk. They saw me every day and say, read this letter. But they did the mushroom treatment thing. They kept me in the dark and, fed me manure. This went well with me. But when I got into it, I discovered this is a kind of a systemic problem based on my reading, in my opinion, when I saw that the Soho House has publications saying, we got double the delight in rejecting the most unsatisfactory members, people who we don't like, who we don't think are worthy. Well, that's the kind of judgment. You're fine to do that, but do it with civility. So the breach of contract, and that's the high five and double our satisfaction. Well, I was emotionally kicked to the curb on the same night, and that's me leaving cluelessly. On the same night, I was physically kicked to the curb And this is an interesting legal case that I failed miserably. I have to laugh because it kind of hurts. I didn't argue it properly. I was under the impression that I didn't have to refute his opening statement where he said, oh, they just touched you with a baguette. It was nothing. It was a Well, I'd re-argued the thing with the previous judge. It was a new judge. I don't think she was familiar. And this is interesting because it's not about an attack on my genitals. And I'm old school. I'm mentioning it here in the art things, and I'm even a little nervous about it, but I have to because it's my job. I wasn't fully comfortable speaking of that in locker room talk in front of a female judge when I'd covered it with the previous lawyer, and he had his second picture, his daughter, the opposing counsel, in the case. So I didn't refute this, and I will now. All I needed to say was, if that was the case of opposing counsel, that it was only a touch, they would not have deleted and had spoliation of evidence, and we'll reenact the attack. But they lost the video conveniently because it was 8 floors of me evading the attacker and everybody skirting out of the way and me saying, don't go there, and kind of fighting to protect myself. And this was a very traumatizing and fucking harsh situation, pardon the French. It was very upsetting to me. And then if that were the case, they wouldn't have fired or terminated him if it was a nothing burger, as the opposing counsel had spoke of. And, that's the sort of thing that can happen and has happened in miscarriages of justice, And to present that properly, I think in America we have a special situation with our First Amendment. We have lax defamation laws, unlike many other countries, where we can comment on cases. We had it with the Amber Heard case. And the press can get involved and promote freedom, and I want to do that, because then it is we the people who see what's going on, and the trickery is exposed. And here's the judge with the trickery, who if she were, in my opinion, not completely ignorant, she wouldn't have made an ignorant statement saying, I don't believe, this was her conclusion, that conflict could prolong for 30 days. It's called a vendetta, and the guy was fighting not only for the betterment of his business to save his boot camp, but for a relationship. And of course those things fester. Those are called vendettas and feuds. Anyway, so I failed summary judgment, and then I missed a filing and to get it to the appeals properly. So once again, chopped. And there's the First Amendment on the chopping block. And when we look at this, in the idea of fairness, I speak of Lee Trevino, who says, I was born a poor Mexican. Lee Trevino. I was born a poor Mexican, but I became, a poor Mexican there. There he is with the badges and the treasure of the Sierra Madre. But I became a rich Spaniard. And the idea of pursuit of happiness and our God-given rights of freedom is that we may not become a rich Spaniard, but at least we can try. And when the field is stacked against you, you don't have a shot at it. And here's an interesting one. Badges. We don't need no stinking badges. I have an interesting case where I had every opportunity once again to be informed that I was persona non grata. And this is my book, you can read the book, called I've Been Kicked Out of Better Places Than This Without Conflict of Constitutional Proportion. Well, this is just another one of the places I was kicked out of. And I said, badges. I was waiting for my badge, and I felt, Jesus, everybody else is getting a badge. And then I find out, where's Thorky? Oh, we saw him, and now he's gone. He's not attending. Well, that's, once again, character defamation by implication, because I should have never been put in a position to receive my badge. Well, that's, once again, the idea of the Milton Friedman model. Now, this was, I believe, for the benefit of the business, because it's the idea of pure profit. So these are cases of that sort of thing. Here's using the police for intimidation. This can be done by businesses for the betterment of their business. And I use this idea of ensure your business is green with fairway good capitalism on your own dance floor going green before going ape on the eighth rainforest. First Amendment Tea Party. So it's the idea that through this golf artwork, which you'll see next, we can promote dignity and respect through golf etiquette for business ethics. Transcending dick behavior, once again, with mutually unified fun and fortune. Once again, for the betterment of a billionaire's business, my European trip was stolen. It's a pétanque tournament. I putt like a savant. So here with this painting, you can see the wonderful experience of camaraderie, competition, fierce competition, winners and losers. Now, when I talk about cushy capitalism, once again, I'm not talking about a weak kind of socialist. You know, you need to have the fire in your belly of competition, but it has to be fair. That's my feeling with a cushy capitalism application. So to resolve this with love, what I suggest is this, and this will bring us to aviation artwork of the 100th Bomb Group coming up next. My dad did this food mission in Netherlands where the pétanque tournament was hosted, or where I was supposed to be hosted, and he flew food drops, the first humanitarian airlift ever. And he was pretty proud of that. He really was traumatized. We'll get into the World War II thing. He was traumatized by all the killing and people blown up and the horrors of war that the new Spielberg movie speaks of. And he was super fun, and that's where I got my whimsical approach, and he was cheeky, but he was very serious as a pilot. So this is a mission that he led, and it's the fight for freedom of expression, where they did the food drop. They did a lot of good, and this is something that he's very proud of, that he saved starving Dutch people. And maybe I lost my thing by karma, who knows. But we can do this with booksellers. These books, I did this in Aspen, I just alluded to it, and I would like to do it with a Soho house. They could sell all my artwork and have the publication for free. They can do it at Barnes & Nobles, etc., as I did in Aspen, with this interactive artwork to promote freedom of expression. It worked out really well in Aspen. We had the Aspen chef from the White House, great restaurant, I love it, and Aces, humanitarian, and they are this Michael from San Moritz. So these are the pillars of society promoting good sportsmanship, and anybody can do it. You just have to hit a painted golf ball and have fun creating aviation sports art. So we'll do that next. And then I'll share what's up, Doc, in the world in conclusion. The 100th Bomb Group gone Hollywood. They're making the movie, Spielberg and Hanks, on my dad's bomb group. These are flying experiences that he shared with me in my paintings of them. A lot of the inherent dangers in flying an aircraft are not necessarily in combat, although he had some pretty crazy combat stuff where like a piece of flak bounced around the cockpit, cut the wires, and hit his knee, yada yada. No, it was sucked for them. But flying is tough in itself and dangerous. This is a painting of what we today call wingtip vortices or wake turbulence. They called it prop wash in that day. When a plane generates lift, it makes this tube. And being that they're flying at the edge of their envelope, fully loaded with a bomb load, the thing will barely get off the ground, heavy on the controls, The thing was a beast. It wasn't designed with all the turrets in mind, just a little sidebar, so they kept adding the armaments, made the plane very sluggish, but it got off the ground very gingerly. That being said, when it just starts to get off the ground, the wake turbulence from the other aircraft, B-17, hits my dad's aircraft and pitches it off the runway towards the high intensity light. And this was a very harrowing experience. I have video of this because I was like in his face with a camera all the time. That'll be fun to show him explaining it. But for now, he had to kick the right rudder, get on the ball, straighten the nose, and it's counterintuitive. You want to level the wings, but as any pilot will tell you, for a takeoff and departure stall, you step on the ball, you kick the rudder so as to level the wings so that you don't accentuate, whether it was a graveyard spiral of JFK where he tried to level the wings with the yoke. So this is airmanship. He had to do that and then get the nose down, have Irv suck the gear up, and his nickname was the Commander, because he really wanted to survive. And he wanted his crew to survive, and he was informed that before he deployed into combat that he needed to have that professionalism. So Irv sucks the gear up, and they get the plane off the ground. So that is harrowing in just airmanship. Then, as I said earlier, they had to fly these things at a stall to get formed up. This is an ironic painting because he speaks of a very tough mission that he didn't get credit for. And it's kind of a catch-22, And he loved the veterans, and was a total peacenik. And he loved his airmen. He wanted to take care of them all. But he saw a lot of the, I don't know how to say it, organizational situations that were, anyway, they had to manage the bombs in World War II. They didn't have enough. And if you look at the strategic bombing campaign, I mean, the last year of the war was exponential. It was just, they started out with nothing, and they were dropping hundreds of thousands of tons. So he loses an engine, has to fly the plane back with the bombs, and this again is airmanship. So you come in hot, and then you don't want to overshoot the runway. So evidently he and Irv were standing on the brakes to get the plane stopped. And that was, a sticky situation. And these are the kind of things that we can kind of experience and express with not only good sportsmanship, but kind of applying, which we'll do in a second, the idea of sportsmanship and sports, interactive sports art to the flying experience. So I have a couple crazy drills where you'll hit not on the outside of the golf ball, where you'll make a drop shot to show the idea of the finesse of sucking the gear up and of flying the plane off a stall, the idea of driving the ball here, keeping the ball centered, and these are just different applications of airmanship that you can read about. So my artwork expresses this flying experience of harrowing experiences in aviation, It was pretty brutal up there. This is an example of what I call my father's Stiegler moment. There's a story of a B-17 pilot named Brown whose plane was beat to hell, and this German fighter pilot didn't have the heart to knock it out of the sky. It was barely hanging on by a thread. So he actually escorted it back. That's chivalry. That's good sportsmanship, even in warfare. That's the idea of the Geneva Convention, and by applying it, you don't need to have a justice system because everybody applies it, and he did it. Not everybody did it, but that was a great example of the Stiegler guy. And my dad had his Stiegler moment because the jets, the Me-262s, were coming online, and they didn't come online in nearly enough numbers to do any real damage to the outcome of the war. But they certainly killed people, and they killed some of my dad's friends just in front of him. 20 guys, 2 planes were blown up, and he zooms past my father, and you see a painting in the book of him saluting my dad. That's the story, and my dad saying hello, and it's in his logbook, and these were examples. He's also in the story of the ramming B-17s. These are more paintings that you can check out. So this is once again an application, and this is very random. And my mom was British, and she was on the other end of this random thing. They didn't even bother going into the tubes. They were like, that was nasty. They wanted to just hang in chill and say, if they get it, they get it. And incidentally, she worked at the War Office, And one day she didn't go in because she had tuberculosis, didn't know it at the time. And a V1 leveled the whole war office, 80 people killed. It was actually V2, the big interballistic one. And so that was so random, and this was totally random too. The jet zooms by my dad and gets the two guys in front of him, and you know, for him it was you know, just doing his job, staying on the approach. And as I say, this was terrible, but at that point in the war, they had the difference between what they called air superiority and air supremacy. And here is an example of lives matter with air supremacy. You can see with air superiority, they could get to the target and accomplish the mission. But with air supremacy, there was such little resistance that the fighters had the right and the freedom to take their own path home to England and take targets of opportunity or help my dad out. So in the shot that I had mentioned earlier of him landing with a B-17 bomb load, barely stopping, you know, they did blow up. It was, you see pictures of that, but he didn't. But he had to fly the thing back on, you know, engine feathered. He had like wounded on board that he was very traumatized about. His co-pilot in the video that I have spoke of that. And you could just see my dad cringe. 70 years later, you know, it was pretty horrific out there. And you see, he didn't want any part of that. He thought that, you know, he wanted the propaganda that it would be like a clean war up there. And you know, he loved partying in London, and the guys were really fun. They were kind of prefiguring yuppies because they were upwardly mobile. They were all like, 40% of the crew were college educated. You know, he was University of Chicago, and a lot of the guys were Ivy League, and they were good fun. But point of the story is, it was totally harsh, and I'm sure Spielberg will show that. So this is air supremacy that saved his ass, because at this point in the war, he had to return because he knew he couldn't keep up with the formation because they had a lot of climbs, and I said the plane was kind of a pig anyway. So he had to like bail on the formation, knowing he would be like the lone guy coming back, which they pick off. And his co-pilot, even in the video you'll see, touches on a subject because we have Swedish heritage. Said, we were hoping you were going to go to Sweden. And my dad, you know, the commander came out, and he's like, we're at a nice lunch at the club, and all of a sudden, like, he got like really stern, and like the vein pops out. I'm like, really? And because he was very serious about this survival thing, and his duty. So, but you know, got over that. So anyway, so they did manage to get fighter escorts home back to England with the P-51s, and have what we call air supremacy with lives saved. He was big on the touring. I think he loved flying. Flying is fun, and he loved the freedom. And because he was like a lead pilot, and you know, made his way up his 350th Squadron, he led a mission to Paris to rescue POWs. And he takes them like all around the Eiffel Tower, and this was reminiscent of like a family vacation from hell. Like, Dad, we've seen the dead presidents in the Rock enough. We don't need to, you know, circle around the Wild West much longer. But that was his thing. And here with air supremacy, he could do that because he saw a downed crew, and his Ralph Shield, I knew his whole crew, they're mentioned in the book, who was like a fun guy, very serious. He was the flight engineer, and he was a guy. For his golf, he actually had a card which the distance of each club, you know, and he like had it all calibrated. Anyway, so he's like, you know, Captain Torrens, I don't think we should circle, because he's circling around this downed crew trying to help them because we have air supremacy, so he can try and save them and ready to win. He's like, we don't think we should circle anymore. My dad's like, one more pass. That was always his thing. And then the engines stop at the end of the taxiway. So that's, you know, the flying experience. Now we're going to do it with washable paints, where you can experience athleticism, sportsmanship, good sportsmanship, promoting dignity and respect. The idea you don't tread on somebody's putting line, you don't tread on somebody. And this was the idea of these freedoms of expression that this war gave us. So that's, and then we'll talk about the last war, the recent war, World War III, the really big one, that I believe we can stop through tolerating pars, not wars. So, interactive golf artwork of the aviation experience. This is a painting of my father being the tour guide over the French city of Paris. And he flew the entire group back as a lead pilot. And now you can experience some of the freedoms and excitement of flying and create an action Jackson Pollock. Simply foam golf ball. Apply washable paint to your foam golf ball. We did this in Aspen. It was a lot of fun. I'm putting it on the petanque court just to be cheeky. Maybe we can do a petanque tournament and settle my case. Then we'll have more paint and go with a little purple. And it's the idea, once again, of freedom of expression, and the idea is to show the excitement. So, see, that was a swing and a miss, but it's pretty. And you just embrace the madness. This can be heaps of fun. So, there we go. Creating artwork. In conclusion, we'll take this 100th Bomb Group idea of sportsmanship and code of conduct and apply it to contemporary affairs and contemporary conflicts, as I have at the border of Sweden and Finland, to promote peace on Earth through tolerating pars, not wars. The idea is deterrence with Olympic conduct. Don't tread on the bear or the bear's putting line. That's what's up top. You can read more about it in the book. You don't have to be a pilot to fly a ball like a Top Gun. That's the Swedish moose. This is the offer to the military, to what we call now the deep state or the military-industrial complex. So Saab is promoting the idea that safety is feeling safe is a human right. Well, I say as long as that feeling is mutual. Don't tread on the bear. You know, that's the idea that the missile crisis is mutual. We wouldn't have the Warsaw Pact in Cuba. So that's my feeling, and that's my feeling to address the military-industrial complex. Donate 20% to the United States Air Force Academy, the Swedish Air Academy. Have the Boeings and the Lockheeds buy some paintings and participate in good sportsmanship to promote peace through fairway good and cushly capitalism. And this is my idea to end the war. As I say, Yankee go home, leave Ukraine alone. Crimea, bye-bye, hello, peace. Thank you.